The words cut through the glittering ballroom like a blade dipped in poison. Poor Lady Rosalind, 23 years old and still unwed. Though I suppose we all understand why. Lady Ashworth's voice carried just far enough. Calculated cruelty disguised as sympathy. The rustle of silk gowns, the clink of champagne glasses, all of it seemed to pause for one terrible heartbeat. Rosalind Fairfax stood frozen near the refreshment table, her gloved hand tightening on the silver handle of her cane. The walking stick, rosewood, elegant but unmistakably necessary, had been part of her since the fever took her at age 7. 17 years of learning to stand tall despite the whispers. 17 years of watching pity and revulsion flicker across faces that once called her beautiful. No gentleman wants a wife who cannot dance, Lady Ashworth continued, her fan snapping shut with pointed emphasis, or bear the duties expected of a proper wife. The words landed like stones. Around them, conversations stuttered and resumed too quickly. The social dance of pretending not to notice while savoring every moment of someone else's humiliation. What none of them saw, what none of them could have predicted, was the tall figure who had gone utterly still across the ballroom. Adrian Thornwell, the Duke of Blackmir, holder of one of the oldest titles in England, stood with a glass of untouched brandy and eyes that had suddenly turned to winter ice. He had been watching Rosalind Fairfax all evening, and now he had heard enough. Rosalind had not always been the object of pity. Once, when she was 6 years old and the Earl of Kenton's only daughter, she had run through the gardens of Fairhaven House with wild abandon, her laughter bright as bells, her future secure in the way only a beloved child's can be. Her mother, the gentle Countess, had called her "my little bird," and her father had promised her she would marry for love, not duty. Then came the fever. It swept through the countryside that autumn like divine judgment, taking servants and nobles alike. Rosalind survived, barely, but the illness left its mark. Her right leg, once strong and sure, became weak, the muscles damaged in ways no physician could fully explain or repair. She would walk again, they said, but never run, never dance, never move through the world without assistance. Her mother wept for weeks. Her father aged 10 years in a single season. And Rosalind, at 7 years old, learned what it meant to be different, to be less. The pitying glances began immediately. Former playmates were pulled away by nervous mothers. Invitations to children's gatherings dwindled, then stopped entirely. When she was finally well enough to return to society at 16, properly launched into the marriage market with a respectable dowry and an earl's daughter's pedigree, she discovered that beauty and breeding meant nothing when measured against a pronounced limp and the need for a walking stick. 5 seasons. 5 years of standing at the edges of ballrooms, watching other girls whirl past in the arms of eligible gentlemen. 5 years of polite rejections wrapped in the language of concern for her health, her comfort, her delicate constitution. I would not wish to tax you, Lady Rosalind. Surely you would prefer to rest rather than dance. My dear, I fear I am too clumsy a partner for someone who requires such careful consideration. Each rejection had taught her to fortify herself, to transform hurt into something harder. She became known for her sharp wit, her extensive reading, her charitable work with London's less fortunate. She learned to smile when matrons whispered. She learned to hold her head high when younger, less accomplished girls received offers she would never see. She learned to be alone. At 23, Rosalind had made her peace with spinsterhood. Her father's estate would pass to a distant cousin upon his death, but he had settled a comfortable independence upon her. She would have her books, her charities, her freedom from the marriage market's humiliations. She had not expected Adrian Thornwell to notice her existence. Adrian Thornwell had inherited his dukedom at 18 when his father died in a hunting accident, leaving behind a title, 6 estates, a fortune that could have funded a small war, and a son who had been trained from birth to value duty above all else. For 14 years, Adrian had been exactly what duty required: impeccable, controlled, cold. He attended Parliament with religious consistency. He managed his estates with ruthless efficiency. He maintained social obligations without ever revealing a hint of genuine feeling. He had loved once, or thought he had, when he was 22. Caroline Westbrook, a baron's daughter with golden hair and a laugh that sounded like music. He had courted her with the stiff formality his position required, had believed her affection genuine, and had allowed himself to imagine a future where duty and desire aligned. Then he had overheard her in the garden at a house party, speaking to her sister. "Of course I will accept him. Do you know what it means to be a duchess? I shall have jewels, gowns, London and country houses. I can tolerate his boring conversation and his tedious sense of duty for all that. But do you love him?" Caroline's laugh had been light, dismissive. "Love? Darling, I love what he can give me. That's all the love a duke requires." Adrian had walked away from that garden and from Caroline Westbrook. He had never proposed. She had married a wealthy merchant the following season, and Adrian had locked whatever remained of his heart behind walls of ice and iron. For 10 years, he had avoided even the appearance of romantic entanglement. He fulfilled his social obligations with mechanical precision. He danced when required exactly twice per ball, never more. He conversed politely but never warmly. He made it clear through every gesture that the Duke of Blackmir was not available for tender feelings or romantic foolishness. Society called him the Frost Duke. Some said he had no heart at all. They were wrong. Adrian simply protected what remained of his heart behind layers of duty and distance. It was safer that way, cleaner, less likely to result in the kind of pain that made a man doubt his own judgment. Until the night he saw Lady Rosalind Fairfax quietly endure Lady Ashworth's cruelty, and something in him, something he thought long dead, stirred with furious life. Adrian found her in the garden 20 minutes later. She had escaped the ballroom through a side door, seeking refuge among the carefully manicured paths and shadow-draped statuary. The night air was cool against her flushed cheeks, the distant music muffled by distance and greenery. She stood beside a marble fountain, one hand gripping her cane, the other pressed to her chest as if trying to contain something breaking inside her. "Lady Rosalind." She whirled at the sound of his voice, too quickly, her balance shifting precariously. He was there in an instant, his hand steadying her elbow with unexpected gentleness. "Your Grace." She stepped back as soon as she was stable, her training reasserting itself. "Forgive me, I did not hear your approach. The fault is mine. I should have announced myself more clearly." He released her arm but remained close enough that she could see his face in the moonlight. "I came to inquire after your well-being." Rosalind's laugh was sharp and bitter. "How kind. I assure you, I am quite accustomed to Lady Ashworth's particular brand of charity." "It was not charity. It was cruel." His voice was flat, cold with controlled anger. "And I will not pretend otherwise to spare your feelings or maintain social niceties." She blinked, surprised by his directness. The Duke of Blackmir was legendary for his rigid adherence to propriety. This blunt honesty felt almost dangerous. "Society is often cruel, Your Grace. I learned that lesson long ago. That does not make it acceptable." He paused, his green eyes studying her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Lady Rosalind, I have a proposition for you." "A proposition?" "A proposal, rather." He clasped his hands behind his back, a defensive gesture she recognized from her own repertoire of self-protection. "I require a wife. You require escape from the marriage market's humiliations. I believe we could reach a mutually beneficial arrangement." Rosalind stared at him. For a wild moment, she thought she had misheard, that the stress of the evening had somehow disordered her mind. "You are proposing marriage. To me." "I am. We have never even been properly introduced. An oversight easily remedied." His expression remained perfectly composed, but something flickered in his eyes, something almost vulnerable. "I am Adrian Thornwell, Duke of Blackmir. I hold estates in 3 counties, maintain residences in London and Derbyshire, and possess a fortune that places me among the wealthiest men in England. I am 32 years of age, in good health, and have no vices beyond an excessive appreciation for well-organized account books." Despite everything, Rosalind felt her lips twitch. "That is quite the comprehensive introduction, Your Grace. I prefer thoroughness to ambiguity. He moved slightly closer. Lady Rosalind, I will speak plainly because I believe you deserve nothing less. I do not offer you a love match. I do not deal in pretty poetry or romantic declarations. What I offer is a partnership based on respect, security, and freedom from the cruelties you have endured. Why? The question emerged before she could stop it. Why me? You could have your pick of society's most beautiful, most accomplished young ladies. Why would you choose? She gestured to herself, to her cane, to all the things that made her unsuitable. Because you are intelligent, Adrian said immediately. Because you have survived years of casual cruelty with your dignity intact. Because you do not simper or flatter or pretend to be something you are not. He paused. And because when I watched you stand in that ballroom tonight, facing Lady Ashworth's venom without flinching, I saw strength that most of London's glittering ornaments will never possess. Rosalind felt something crack in her chest, the hard shell she had built around herself. That is either the kindest thing anyone has ever said to me, or the most calculated flattery I have encountered. It is true. His voice softened fractionally. I am not a warm man, Lady Rosalind. I will not pretend otherwise. But I am honest, and I would treat you with the respect and consideration you have been denied. You would be the Duchess of Blackmir. No one would dare mock you again. You would have freedom, security, and my protection. And what would you gain? He hesitated, the first real crack in his composure. A wife who would not expect things I cannot give. A partner who understands that some arrangements are better built on practical foundations than romantic illusions. There was pain there buried deep. Rosalind recognized it because she carried her own. I need time to consider, she said quietly. Of course, I will call upon your father tomorrow to request permission to court you properly. If, after 2 weeks, you find the arrangement agreeable, we can announce our engagement. He stepped back, restoring proper distance between them. I will not pressure you, Lady Rosalind. This must be your choice, freely made. And if I refuse? Something flickered across his face. Disappointment, perhaps, though it was gone too quickly to name. Then I will respect your decision and trouble you no further. He bowed formally and turned to leave. Your Grace. He stopped, looking back. Thank you, Rosalind said softly, for what you said, for seeing me as something other than a burden or an object of pity. Adrian's expression softened almost imperceptibly. You are neither, Lady Rosalind. You are remarkable. I hope you come to believe that. Then he was gone, leaving her alone with the fountain's gentle whisper and a heart that, for the first time in years, dared to feel something other than resignation. Adrian Thornwell was nothing like the suitors who had approached Rosalind before. He arrived at Fairhaven House the following morning, precisely at the appointed hour, carrying a book rather than flowers. I noticed at the Ashworth ball that you were carrying a volume of Wordsworth, he said after the initial formalities with her surprised father. I thought you might appreciate this, a first edition of lyrical ballads I acquired last year. The marginalia includes notes from Coleridge himself. Rosalind took the book with trembling hands. It was extraordinary, worth a small fortune and chosen with obvious care. This is too valuable a gift, Your Grace. It is a gift for someone who will value it properly, he corrected. Books should be treasured, not displayed. Their courtship unfolded in ways that shocked society and surprised even Rosalind herself. Adrian did not take her driving in Hyde Park where crowds could gawk and whisper. Instead, he invited her to walk through his private gardens in London, where the paths were smooth and even, where they could speak without performance or audience. I had these sections reinforced, he mentioned casually during their second walk, gesturing to the perfectly level stone pathway. The previous design was treacherous even for able-bodied visitors. Poor planning. Rosalind looked at him sharply. The renovation had clearly been recent. She could see where new stone met old. He had done this for her. That was thoughtful, she said quietly. It was practical. But his ears had turned slightly red, giving lie to his indifferent tone. He did not ask her to dance. Instead, he attended the theater with her, securing a private box where she could sit comfortably and discussing the performance with genuine interest in her opinions. "You disagree with the director's interpretation," he observed during an interval. "I think Lady Macbeth is more complex than mere villainy," Rosalind said, warming to the topic. "Her grief over her lost children is often overlooked in favor of her ambition." "An interesting read." He leaned forward slightly. "Continue." And she did. For the first time in her adult life, a man listened to her thoughts not with patronizing patience but with genuine intellectual engagement. He met her father with respect but also with firmness. The Earl of Kenton, protective and wary, had tried to probe Adrian's intentions. "My daughter has been hurt before, Your Grace. Men who make promises they do not intend to keep." "I make no promises beyond what I can fulfill," Adrian had replied, his voice cool but not unkind. "I will not offer Lady Rosalind romantic declarations or passionate displays, but I will offer her respect, security, and a position where she will be protected from the cruelties she has endured. You have my word as a gentleman and appear that I will honor my commitments to her." The Earl had studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You are an unusual man, Blackmir. Perhaps that is precisely what your daughter requires." By the end of the first week, Rosalind found herself looking forward to Adrian's visits with an anticipation that frightened her. She had armored herself against hope, and now this cold, controlled Duke was threatening to dismantle her defenses with quiet gestures and honest conversation. The turning point came on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Adrian had arrived for tea, but instead of the usual drawing room formality, Rosalind's father had been called away on estate business. The proprieties required a chaperone, but her mother, seeing something in Adrian's steady presence, made herself scarce after precisely 10 minutes, trusting in the Duke's legendary correctness. They were alone. Rosalind poured tea with practiced grace, but her hands shook slightly. Adrian noticed, he noticed everything but said nothing. "I received a letter from my steward this morning," he said, accepting his cup. "There is a matter requiring my attention at Blackmir Hall. I must leave London for several days." Disappointment crashed through her, sharp and unexpected. "Of course, your estates must take precedence. I would like you to accompany me." Her hand froze halfway to her own teacup. "I beg your pardon?" "With appropriate chaperonage, naturally. Your mother, your lady's maid, whomever you deem necessary." He set down his cup with careful precision. "I want you to see Blackmir Hall before you make your final decision. It will be your home should you accept my proposal. You should understand what that means. That is highly irregular. I am proposing marriage, Lady Rosalind. A certain degree of irregularity seems inevitable." His lips curved in what might almost have been a smile. "Besides, I suspect you are tired of being conventional. Conventional has not served you particularly well." She shouldn't. Every rule of propriety screamed against it. But something in his eyes, something genuine and almost vulnerable, made her want to trust him. "When do we leave?" This time his smile was unmistakable. "Tomorrow morning, if you are amenable. The journey is 6 hours by comfortable carriage." Blackmir Hall rose from the Derbyshire countryside like something from a dream. All golden stone and Gothic towers, surrounded by grounds that stretched to the horizon. But what struck Rosalind was not its grandeur but its warmth. Unlike the cold perfection of many aristocratic estates, Blackmir felt lived in, loved, alive. "It's beautiful," she breathed as the carriage rolled up the drive. "It's home," Adrian said simply, and for the first time since she had met him, his expression was completely unguarded. The staff had lined up to greet them, a duchess in waiting, even one not yet officially engaged, merited full ceremony. But Adrian cut through the formality with characteristic directness. "Lady Rosalind will be touring the house and grounds over the next few days. Please ensure she has everything she requires and answer any questions she may have about the running of the household." He looked at his housekeeper, Mrs. Thornby, a capable woman in her 50s. "I want her to see Blackmir as it truly is, not as we present it for guests." "Understood." Mrs. Thornby's eyes gleamed with approval. "Perfectly, Your Grace. The tour began that afternoon. Adrian showed her everything. The library that spanned 2 floors, the music room with instruments that were actually played rather than displayed, the conservatory where exotic plants thrived under glass, the estate office where he managed his holdings with meticulous care. But it was in the village that Rosalind truly began to understand him. They visited tenants, and she watched Adrian speak with farmers and craftsmen with genuine respect. He knew their names, their children's names, the specific challenges each family faced. He listened more than he spoke. When a farmer mentioned difficulty with flooding in his lower fields, Adrian immediately made notes and promised engineering consultation. "You care about them," Rosalind said as they walked back toward the main house, her mother trailing at a discreet distance. "They are not merely sources of income. They are people entrusted to my care." He glanced at her. "A title carries responsibilities, Lady Rosalind. I take mine seriously." "I can see that." She paused on the path, turning to face him. "Why are you showing me this? You could have presented Blackmir's grandeur and let me be dazzled." "Because grandeur is not a partnership." His green eyes held hers. "If you marry me, this will be your responsibility as well. You should know what that means, not the balls and the jewels and the empty pageantry, but the real work of caring for lands and people. I wanted you to see whether that life appeals to you. And if it doesn't, then you should refuse me. Better honesty now than resentment later." The raw vulnerability in his voice undid her. This powerful, controlled man was offering her truth where others had offered only flattery. "I want to see more," she said softly. "I want to understand." Something lit in his expression, relief, perhaps, or hope. They spent 3 days at Blackmir, and with each day, Rosalind felt her carefully constructed defenses crumbling. She saw Adrian with his tenants, with his staff, with the land he clearly loved. She saw him work late into the night over account books, ensuring his people were provided for. She saw him gentle with children, fair with disputes, generous with praise for good work. She also saw the loneliness that shadowed him in unguarded moments. The way he stood at windows looking out over his lands as if they were a kingdom where he ruled but did not belong. The careful distance he maintained from genuine connection. They were both so lonely, she realized. Both are so careful. Both are so afraid. On their last evening at Blackmir, they walked through the gardens at twilight. Her mother had retired early with a convenient headache, trusting the Duke's honor and her daughter's judgment. "Thank you for bringing me here," Rosalind said as they paused beside a reflecting pool where swans glided in elegant silence. "I understand now why you love it." "Do you?" Adrian's voice was quiet. "Or do you simply understand why I hide here?" She looked at him sharply. In the fading light, his features were softer, more vulnerable than she had ever seen them. "I am not good at this," he continued, his gaze fixed on the swans. "At feelings, at connection. I have spent years building walls because it seemed safer than risking pain again." He drew a breath. "But you, Lady Rosalind, you make me want to remember how to be more than duty and distance." Her heart was pounding. "Adrian, I know I promised you a practical arrangement, and I will honor that if it is what you require. But I find I must be honest with you." He turned to face her fully. "I brought you here not merely to show you Blackmir, but because I wanted to see you in the place I love most. Because in these 3 days, watching you speak with tenants and laugh with children and walk through my home as if you belonged there." He stopped, his jaw tightening. "You fit, Rosalind. You fit in ways I did not expect and cannot fully articulate." She felt tears prickling her eyes. "You said you did not deal in romantic declarations. I am trying very hard not to frighten you with the depth of what I am beginning to feel." His hand lifted, hesitated, then gently touched her cheek. "But neither can I lie to you. This may have begun as a practical arrangement, but it is becoming something more. At least for me. Adrian." Her voice broke on his name. "I am terrified. So am I." He smiled sadly. "But perhaps we can be terrified together." She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel, to hope, to want, to believe that perhaps she deserved something beautiful. When his lips met hers, gentle and questioning, she answered with everything she had been too afraid to acknowledge. The kiss was not passionate or desperate. It was honest, a promise tentatively offered and cautiously accepted. When they parted, both were breathing unsteadily. "I want to say yes," Rosalind whispered. "I want you, but I am so afraid of being hurt again." "Then let me prove I will not hurt you." Adrian's thumb brushed her cheekbone. "Let me show you, day by day, that what I offer is real. That is all I ask. Then you shall have it." He kissed her forehead gently. "Every day, Rosalind. I will prove it every day." The engagement announcement appeared in the Times exactly 1 week after their return to London. The Duke of Blackmir is pleased to announce his engagement to Lady Rosalind Fairfax, daughter of the Earl of Kenton. The wedding will take place at St. George's, Hanover Square, in 4 weeks' time. Society exploded with gossip. The Frost Duke was marrying? And to Lady Rosalind, the crippled Earl's daughter whom no one wanted? It was impossible, inexplicable. There had to be an explanation beyond the obvious. The whispers began immediately. He must need her dowry. His estates must be failing. Perhaps he made some bargain with Kenton. Political alliance of some sort. Blackmir is known for charitable works. This must be another of his philanthropic gestures. A pity marriage. Rosalind heard them all. She had known the gossip would come, had steeled herself against it. But knowing and experiencing were different things entirely. Adrian seemed oblivious or perhaps deliberately indifferent to the speculation. He continued their courtship with the same steady attention, calling daily, escorting her to select events, treating her with consistent respect and growing affection. But the poison was spreading. 3 weeks before the wedding, Rosalind attended a tea party at Lady Carleton's townhouse. It was meant to be celebratory, a gathering of ladies to toast the bride-to-be and offer advice and good wishes. Lady Ashworth was there. "How wonderful for you, Lady Rosalind," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "to secure such an advantageous match despite your circumstances. The Duke must be truly charitable to overlook so much." "I believe His Grace sees value where others see only limitation," Rosalind replied evenly. "Oh, certainly. Though one does wonder." Lady Ashworth sipped her tea delicately. "What exactly does the Duke gain from this arrangement? Blackmir is wealthy beyond measure. He hardly needs your dowry, and you cannot provide him with the social connections other matches might offer. Perhaps he values intelligence and character over social climbing," another lady suggested pointedly. "Perhaps." Lady Ashworth's smile turned sharp. "Or perhaps the poor man simply cannot find a wife willing to tolerate his cold nature. And you, my dear Lady Rosalind, are desperate enough to accept any offer, even one motivated by pity." The room went silent. Rosalind felt the words like physical blows. Not because they were new, she had heard variations on this theme for weeks, but because they articulated her deepest fear. The fear she tried to bury, tried to ignore, tried to pray away in the dark hours of night. What if it was a pity? What if Adrian's growing affection was simply duty dressed in kindness? What if she was fooling herself, seeing love where there was only obligation? She stood with as much grace as she could manage. "Thank you for the tea, Lady Carleton. I find I am unwell. Please excuse me." She fled before anyone could see the tears. Adrian found her an hour later in her father's library, where she had hidden herself away behind locked doors and drawn curtains. "Rosalind." His voice was gentle, concerned. "Your mother told me you returned from Lady Carleton's in distress. Please, let me in." "Go away, Adrian." "I will not." Pause. "I will stand here all night if necessary, but I will not leave you to face whatever this is alone." She wanted to send him away, wanted to protect both of them from the conversation she knew was coming. But she was so tired of being afraid. She unlocked the door. He entered, took one look at her tear-stained face, and something in his expression turned to ice-cold fury. "Who hurt you?" "It doesn't matter. It matters to me." He crossed to her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Tell me." So she did. She told him about Lady Ashworth's poison, about the whispers that had followed her for weeks, about the fear that lived in her chest like a trapped bird. "They think you pity me," she finished, her voice breaking. "They think this is charity. And Adrian, I need to know. I need to know if they are right." His face went very still. "You believe I am marrying you out of pity? I believe you are a good man who saw someone suffering and wanted to help. I believe you convinced yourself that practical fondness was enough foundation for marriage." She stepped back, forcing herself to meet his eyes. "But I need more than that. I need—" Her voice cracked. "I need to know that when you look at me, you see a woman you want, not a wounded creature you feel obligated to protect." "Rosalind, I cannot marry you if this is a pity, Adrian. I cannot build a life on that foundation. It will destroy us both." He stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, without warning, he pulled her hard against him and kissed her with desperate intensity. Nothing gentle or questioning about it. This was needed, raw, and undeniable. When he finally released her, they were both breathing hard. "Does that feel like pity?" His voice was rough. "Because if so, I have been deeply confused about the emotion." "Adrian, you want honesty? Here is honesty." He framed her face with both hands, forcing her to look at him. "I did not approach you out of pity. I approached you because watching you endure Lady Ashworth's cruelty made me furious. Because your strength in the face of years of casual brutality awed me. Because when I stood across that ballroom and saw you standing alone, I recognized myself, and I wanted, desperately, to not be alone anymore." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I brought you to Blackmir not out of obligation, but because I needed to see you there. Needed to know if the place that matters most to me could become yours as well. And when you laughed with my tenants and worked with my housekeeper and sat beside me in the library as if you belonged there." His voice roughened. "You became necessary to me, Rosalind. Not a duty, not a charitable act. Necessary." "I'm afraid," she whispered. "I know. So am I." He rested his forehead against hers. "I am terrified I will fail you, that I am too cold, too controlled, too broken to give you what you deserve. But I am more terrified of losing you to fear and lies whispered by people who have never known what we are building." "What are we building?" "Something real, something honest." He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "Something worth fighting for." She wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe. But the fear was still there, sharp and insistent. "I need time," she said softly. "I need to think." His expression tightened, but he nodded. "How much time?" "I don't know. The wedding is in 3 weeks, Rosalind." "I know." He stepped back, and she felt the loss of his warmth like the winter wind. "Then I will give you time. But know this, I am not withdrawing my offer. I am not running. I will wait as long as necessary for you to believe what I already know." "And what do you know?" His smile was sad and infinitely tender. "That you are the only woman I will ever want to marry. That you are worth waiting for. That I love you, even if I am terrible at showing it in ways society recognizes." He said it. He finally said it. "I love you too," she sobbed. "That's why I'm so afraid." "Then let your love be stronger than your fear." He kissed her forehead gently. "I will be waiting, Rosalind, however long it takes." 2 weeks before the wedding, Lady Ashworth hosted a ball. The invitation had arrived at Fairhaven House with pointed politeness. The Earl had wanted to refuse. Rosalind had not left the house since her confrontation with Adrian, had cancelled all social engagements, had barely eaten or slept. But Rosalind, reading the invitation with its subtle mockery, had felt something shift inside her. She was tired of hiding, tired of letting fear and cruelty dictate her choices, tired of being the victim of other people's judgment. "I want to attend," she told her father. "Rosalind, that woman has been vicious to you." "Yes, and I am done allowing her viciousness to have power over me." She lifted her chin with determination that reminded the Earl of his daughter before the fever. Bright and bold and unafraid. "I will attend, and I will ask Adrian to escort me." Adrian arrived at Fairhaven House within an hour of receiving her note. She met him in the drawing room, her mother discreetly absent. "You sent it to me." His eyes searched her face hungrily. 2 weeks apart had worn on both of them. "I want you to escort me to Lady Ashworth's ball tomorrow night." His eyebrows rose. "The woman who has been spreading poison about you?" "The same. Why would you subject yourself to that?" "Because I am tired of hiding." She crossed to him, her cane tapping softly on polished wood. "Because you are right, what we are building is worth fighting for. And I am done letting fear win." Something fierce and proud lit his expression. "Then I would be honored to escort you, my lady." "There is something else." She drew a breath. "I want to marry you, Adrian. Not in 3 weeks, but sooner. I want to marry you before this ball." "Rosalind." "I have spent 2 weeks thinking, and here is what I know. I love you. I trust you. And I want to walk into that ballroom not as your fiancée, but as your wife. I want the world to see that you chose me, that I chose you, and that our choice was real." Adrian's hands trembled as he reached for her. "Are you certain?" "I have never been more certain of anything." He kissed her then, deep and claiming, and when they parted, his eyes were bright with emotion. "Then let us marry tomorrow morning, by special license with only our families present." "And then we attend the ball?" His smile was almost feral. "And then we show London exactly what they have underestimated." They married at dawn in the private chapel at Fairhaven House. Rosalind wore a gown of ivory silk, simple but elegant, with pearls her mother had worn at her own wedding. Adrian wore black formal dress, his cravat precise, but his eyes never leaving his bride's face. When the vicar asked if he took this woman as his wife, Adrian's voice rang clear and certain. "I do, now and always." And when Rosalind spoke her vows, she meant every word. "I take you, Adrian Thornwell, as my husband, in joy and in sorrow, in strength and in weakness, as my partner and my love." The kiss that sealed their marriage was witnessed only by family, tender and true and theirs alone. But that night, all of London would witness what came next. Lady Ashworth's ballroom glittered with candlelight and malice. The cream of society had gathered, drawn by the promise of spectacle. Everyone knew Lady Rosalind Fairfax had gone into seclusion. Everyone knew the engagement to the Duke of Blackmir was in question. Everyone expected a scandal. Lady Ashworth held court near the center of the room. Her latest victim, a young lady who had made the mistake of wearing an unfashionable gown. "Poor dear," Lady Ashworth said loudly enough to carry. "Some people simply do not have the taste to navigate society. One must be born to it, I suppose." Laughter rippled through her circle of admirers. Then the majordomo's voice cut through the chatter like a blade. "His Grace, the Duke of Blackmir, and Her Grace, the Duchess of Blackmir." The ballroom went utterly silent. Every head turned. Every conversation stopped. Because walking through the entrance, his hand possessively on her waist, was Adrian Thornwell. And beside him, crowned in pearls and diamonds, stood Rosalind. Not Lady Rosalind, the Duchess of Blackmir. She walked slowly, her cane tapping softly on marble. But she walked with her head high and her hands secure in her husband's. The sapphire gown she wore, Adrian's gift, made her eyes luminous. The Blackmir diamonds at her throat caught the light like stars. She looked like exactly what she was. A duchess. Powerful, elegant, untouchable. The crowd parted as they moved through it. Adrian's cold green gaze swept the room, and strong men found reasons to look away. This was the Frost Duke in full fury, and everyone present suddenly remembered why crossing Blackmir was a very bad idea. They stopped directly before Lady Ashworth. The woman had gone pale, her eyes wide with shock and something that looked like fear. "Lady Ashworth." Adrian's voice was perfectly polite and cold as winter ice. "How kind of you to invite my wife and me to your gathering." Your wife," Lady Ashworth stammered. "Indeed. We got married this morning by special license." His arm tightened around Rosalind's waist. "I found I could not wait until the customary period to make Lady Rosalind, now the Duchess of Blackmir, my wife. When one encounters perfection, delay seems rather foolish. Rosalind smiled, the expression serene and devastating. You seem surprised, Lady Ashworth. I trust you are not disappointed? You expressed such concern about my matrimonial prospects. I am pleased to inform you that they resolved quite satisfactorily. The cut was surgical, polite on the surface, brutal underneath. Lady Ashworth's face flushed red, then white. Around them, society watched with avid attention. This was a blood sport of the highest order. Of course, I am delighted, Lady Ashworth managed. Though the haste is rather unusual. Is it? Adrian's eyebrow arched. I was unaware that decisiveness in securing one's future was considered unusual. Perhaps in circles that value gossip over action, such things seem strange. In my circles, we simply call it intelligent. The blow landed with devastating precision. Lady Ashworth was known for gossip, known for cruelty disguised as concern, and Adrian had just dismissed her and her entire social circle as beneath his notice. Now, Adrian continued, his voice dropping to carry only to their immediate vicinity, which meant half the ballroom strained to hear, I want to address something that has troubled me greatly. It has come to my attention that certain individuals. His gaze swept over Lady Ashworth and her circle of admirers. Have suggested that my marriage to Rosalind is motivated by pity or charity. The ballroom collectively held its breath. Let me be abundantly clear. Adrian turned to face Rosalind fully, his hand cupping her cheek with tender possession. I did not marry my wife out of pity. I married her because she is the most remarkable woman I have ever encountered, because her intelligence challenges me, her strength awes me, and her capacity for kindness in the face of cruelty humbles me. His voice roughened with emotion. I married her because a world without her in it seemed unbearably empty, because when I imagine my future, every joy, every triumph, every quiet evening, she is there, essential and irreplaceable. Tears gleamed in Rosalind's eyes. So if there are those present who believe they understand my motivations better than I do myself, Adrian continued, his gaze returning to Lady Ashworth with cutting precision, let me disabuse them of that notion. I am not charitable. I am not sorry. I am a man who recognized value where small minds saw only limitations. And I am grateful, profoundly grateful, that your cruelty and short-sightedness left Rosalind available for me to find. Lady Ashworth looked as if she might faint. Come, my love, Adrian said, turning to Rosalind. I believe I promised you a waltz. I cannot dance, Rosalind said softly. Then we shall stand together while others dance, and I shall hold you, and that will be infinitely preferable to anything else this evening might offer. He led her to the edge of the ballroom where she could stand comfortably. And there, in full view of society, the powerful Duke of Blackmir stood with his wife in his arms, her head resting against his shoulder, while music swirled around them. They did not dance. They simply held each other. And somehow that was more romantic, more powerful, more devastating to every cruel whisper than any waltz could have been. Around them, society watched and recalculated. The Duchess of Blackmir was now one of the highest-ranking women in England. To cross her was to cross Blackmir. And no one with any sense crossed Blackmir. Lady Ashworth's social power, built on cruelty and whispers, crumbled in a single evening. Within the week, invitations to her gatherings would decline. Within the month, her circle of admirers would disperse. Within the year, she would be irrelevant. But Rosalind barely noticed. She was too focused on the man holding her, on the life they were building together, on the love that had grown from the most unlikely soil. Thank you, she whispered against Adrian's chest. For what? For seeing me, for choosing me, for proving that love can be stronger than fear. His arms tightened around her. Thank you for giving me the chance to try, for believing I could be more than ice and duty. You were always more, she said. You just needed someone to show you. As did you. He kissed her forehead gently. Shall we leave this spectacle and return home, Duchess? Yes, please. As they walked out of Lady Ashworth's ballroom together, Rosalind felt lighter than she had in years. The whispers would continue, they always did. But they had lost their power. She was loved. She was chosen. She was enough. And that truth was stronger than any cruelty society could devise. Rosalind stood at the window of her sitting room, watching the summer sun paint the gardens gold. Her hand rested on her rounded belly, feeling the flutter of life within. A child. Their child. The physician had warned that pregnancy might be difficult given her condition, but so far everything had proceeded normally. Adrian had been insufferable in his protectiveness, but she found she didn't mind. Came from love, not pity. She understood the difference now. There you are. Adrian's voice, warm now in ways it never was for anyone else, preceded him into the room. He crossed to her, his arms sliding around her from behind, his hands covering hers on her belly. How are you feeling? Perfectly well. The same as I was an hour ago when you last asked. Humor me. I am new to this business of impending fatherhood. She leaned back against him, smiling. You will be a wonderful father. I will try. He pressed a kiss to her temple. Though I confess I am terrified. Of what? Of failing them. Of being too cold, too distant. Rosalind turned in his arms to face him. You are neither cold nor distant with me. Why would you be with our child? Because I don't know how to be any other way with anyone else. Then you will learn. We will learn together. She touched his face gently. Adrian, you spent years protecting yourself. It makes sense that vulnerability feels dangerous. But you have already proven you can be more than duty and walls. You do it with me every day. He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. You make me better. We make each other better. That is what partnership means. They had found their rhythm this past year. Adrian still worked long hours on estate business, but now Rosalind worked beside him, her insights into tenant welfare and charitable distribution proving invaluable. They had established a school for estate children, improved housing for workers, and implemented fair wage policies that set standards for the region. And at night, they came together, not out of duty, but out of genuine desire and deepening love. We received another letter from Lady Castlereagh, Adrian said, settling into the chair by the window and pulling Rosalind onto his lap. Carefully, always so carefully with her. She wants to know when we will return to London for the season. What did you tell her? That the Duchess of Blackmir will return to London when she chooses, and not a moment before. Rosalind laughed. You cannot keep me isolated in the country forever, Adrian. I can try. But he smiled. Truthfully, I told her we would come in autumn, after the baby arrives and you are recovered. That seemed reasonable. Very reasonable. She traced the line of his jaw. Though I confess I am in no hurry to face society again. They wouldn't dare trouble you now. He was right. The past year had seen a complete reversal of Rosalind's social position. The Duchess of Blackmir was respected, even feared. Her charitable work had earned genuine admiration, and Adrian's obvious devotion had silenced even the most determined gossips. Lady Ashworth had retired to her country estate, her reputation in tatters. Most of her former circle had defected, seeking favor with the Blackmirs instead. I saw the strangest thing yesterday, Rosalind said thoughtfully. A letter from Lord Hartley. Adrian's expression darkened. The gentleman who courted you 3 years ago before deciding you weren't suitable? The same. Apparently, he has heard of our happiness and wished to extend his congratulations. How magnanimous. Adrian's tone could have frozen water. What did you do with this letter? Used it to start the fire in my sitting room. It seemed the most appropriate response. His laugh surprised and delighted me. My vicious Duchess. I learned from the best. She kissed him softly. Adrian, I don't need apologies from men who couldn't see my value. I have you. I have this life. I have everything I never dared dream of. As do I. His hand settled over hers on her belly. A wife I adore, a child on the way, and a future that feels real rather than merely dutiful. No regrets. Only that I didn't find you sooner. He tilted her chin up. though perhaps we both needed time to become people who could appreciate what we have. A lovely philosophical observation, Your Grace. I am occasionally capable of philosophy. His expression turned serious. Rosalind, I need you to know something. What is it? This year with you has been the happiest of my life. Not despite your limitations, but because of who you are in your entirety. The strength, the vulnerability, the courage it takes to move through the world when the world has not been kind. You have taught me that perfection is not the absence of struggle, but the choice to keep going regardless. Tears pricked her eyes. Adrian, I love you, he continued, his voice rough with emotion. Not carefully, not reasonably, not with any of the control I thought necessary. I love you wholly and desperately, and with every part of myself I thought too damaged to feel this deeply. I love you too, she whispered. So much it terrifies me sometimes. Then we shall be terrified together, as we always are. They sat together as afternoon faded to evening, talking of their plans, their hopes, their dreams for the child growing between them. And when night fell, they retired to their shared chambers. No more separate rooms, no more careful distance, and found comfort and joy in each other's arms. The nursery at Blackmir Hall rang with children's laughter. Rosalind stood in the doorway, watching as Adrian played on the floor with their 3 children. Catherine, now 4 years old with her mother's gray eyes and her father's dark hair. Thomas, 2, already showing signs of his father's serious temperament, and baby Eleanor, just 6 months old and utterly adored by her older siblings. Papa, you are not a very frightening dragon, Catherine informed Adrian solemnly as he made exaggerated roaring sounds. I am a terrifying dragon, Adrian protested, tickling her until she shrieked with giggles. The most fearsome dragon in all of England. No, you are a nice dragon, Thomas said matter-of-factly. Nice dragons don't scare little girls. Your children have destroyed my reputation, Adrian said, looking up at Rosalind with mock despair. I used to be the Frost Duke. Now I am a nice dragon. A terrible fall indeed, Rosalind agreed, unable to keep the smile from her face. He stood, scooping up baby Eleanor with practiced ease, and crossed to kiss Rosalind's cheek. Dinner is nearly ready. Shall I have the nursemaid take the children? Soon. I want to watch them a bit longer. They stood together, his free arm around her waist, watching their children play. Catherine was already trying to teach Thomas his letters, her patience surprising in one so young. Thomas listened with intense concentration, determined to please his adored older sister. Do you remember? Rosalind said softly. When we thought this would be a practical arrangement, I remember thinking I was very clever to secure such a beneficial partnership. And what do you think now? Adrian turned her to face him, his expression tender. I think I was an absolute fool who stumbled into the greatest blessing of his life by pure chance. I think I am grateful every day that you were brave enough to say yes when logic said you shouldn't. I think I am the luckiest man in England. Only England? Not the world. Very well, the world. He kissed her nose gently. The entire world. Good answer. They had built something extraordinary from the most unlikely beginning. A marriage that began as an escape from cruelty had become the deepest partnership Rosalind had ever imagined. Adrian had learned to thaw, to feel, to express the depth of his emotion. And Rosalind had learned that her worth was not diminished by her limitations. It was enhanced by her resilience. Together, they had created a family built on love, respect, and the profound understanding that true strength often comes from vulnerability. Mama, Catherine called. Come see. Thomas learned the whole alphabet. Did he indeed? Rosalind moved into the nursery, Adrian beside her as always, ready to steady her if needed, though she rarely required it anymore. Her strength had grown, both physical and emotional, as she knelt to praise her son's accomplishment, as Adrian settled beside her with Eleanor gurgling in his arms, as Catherine chatted about her plans for tomorrow's adventure in the gardens. Rosalind felt a peace so profound it brought tears to her eyes. Lady Ashworth had been wrong. Every cruel whisper had been wrong. She was not pitiable. She was not less. She was exactly enough for herself, for her children. and for the remarkable man who had looked past society's judgments and seen her true value. "What are you thinking?" Adrian murmured, catching her expression. "That I am grateful." "For what?" "For everything." She leaned against him, her hand finding his. "For cruelty that led to kindness. For fear that gave way to courage. For a practical arrangement that became the love story I never dared imagine." His arms tightened around her and their baby daughter. "As am I, my love. As am I." And in the warm nursery at Blackmir Hall, surrounded by their children and their love, the Duke and Duchess of Blackmir found the happiness that society said was impossible. They proved, as they had proven so many times before, that what society believed mattered far less than what two people were willing to build together. They proved that love sees past limitations to recognize worth. They proved that the most powerful force in the world is not cruelty or judgment, but the courage to choose love despite fear. And they lived, as all the best love stories promise, happily ever after.